Yeah, better.
All right. Well, welcome all to the P2 live forum. Uh, Today's a big day at Parallax. A lot of things are going on, including the launch of a website, which you're all helping us debug right about now. So I thought we'd start out just by going over there, and I don't want to give you a real boring self-guided tour where you watch my screen, but a couple things about the site I just want to tell you guys and get everyone's feedback on as we go forward. So we can make this thing really good. First off, we were stuck in a very old system. We came from N.NET Nuke, and then we went to Drupal, and now as you could see, you'll probably recognize it's WordPress. So we've been able to trade a lot of staff and people that have a lot of secret knowledge towards any monkey they can enter as password now can make the changes that are needed, which has given tremendous power to most everybody in our office. So the website, going way back, you might remember when the P1 came out, we had what we called Parallax
Alexa,
Semi.
stop.
Okay, I'm just going to do a little bit of muting on somebody here, so feel free to unmute yourself anytime. There's no rules here about when you can talk and not talk. You might remember Parallax Semiconductor back in 2006 when we wanted to have a more official look about what we were doing with the P1. And we ran that for a couple of years, and yeah, it was okay, but it really wasn't going in anywhere because we did not progress on getting the P2, and we had trouble delivering on our own promises, like the gold standard for objects. And well, anyone who is hanging around remembers that. So the new site is trying to speak to our commercial customers and our educational ones equally. As I mentioned this before, and we're going to try to make this work, I think it's probably very easy to do for commercial users. They're fine seeing robots and other fun stuff next to their very serious chips. But sometimes for educators, coming and looking for the robots, it's a bit intimidating to run into this and say, I thought this is Parallax Educational Company. So for the time being, the P2 will have a lot of attention as we mature it, and let us know if this is all looking right to you. So on the old website, the P2 was not even present except for some online ordering pages where you can find the products. It had no menu system. Everything was on propeller.parallax.com. So we brought over all that content and we've dropped it in here. So the site is a little bit slow to load. And you'll see some of Chip's animations here. Aren't those neat?
Yeah, Jeff, I think Jeff did those.
Oh, these are cool. Yeah, and then some comparison for people that just insist on comparing what we made in 2006 to what's available now. We've offered some kind of comparison, and that was reviewed really carefully by Jeff, who does a great job. So once you go into the P2 page, you'll see a table of contents on the left that'll get you to the different pages, and we've tried to provide some guidance on the hardware for people getting started. In regards to boards that we don't make, like the P2D2 and the Retro Blade 2 and anything else, we want to feature all those products here. And if you send them to us and we can photograph them, or if you can give us details, then we'll put them here next to our product. You just want to be sure you have a way to make your device for sale so people can buy it. Okay, so that's kind of the requirement. We don't want them to come here and get dead air. One of the sections I worked on with several of you that I really like is this language quick start. I'm a good case study for a noob because I'm not much of a programmer and I trip on all the tools. So I worked with Eric and with Jeff and with TMOZ, and we made these quick start guides. So people can at least get to the point of blinking an LED quickly. So going through this, we'll show them where to download the tool, hook something up, get a hello world. And just doing a few more mutes really quick. Do a hello world program and this kind of thing. So there's a nice section as well for Python. And invite all of you to try this out and just let us know where you're seeing trouble. but it really should be quite easy to get started now. So no more hunting on the forums. We do have a little bit of retraining of our own team, like Chip, to get his content here instead of on the forums. So we'll be working with Chip and others that post things there to bring it in here. So anything you guys make that you want shared here, I can post here. I don't have to negotiate with anybody or check with anybody. It's all up to you and I. The P2 live forum, all the videos are listed in our social media. So, and this is probably not the right title, probably change this title just to P2 live forums, but you can view all past videos here and you'll see a event schedule now. And if you click on that, it'll take you to our events page. And this will be the, oh, got to fix that. So it's also under community and then events.
Bugs always show up when you didn't demo it.
Exactly. Well, I'm not afraid to totally crash on this. It was a little bit terrifying for some of our team this morning, but what are the consequences? They're low, right?
Yeah, low risk.
Yeah, it's not a game, not a video game with a bunch of people standing around. So
There's only one way to go, but up.
yeah,
Right
and the
now?
first customer, that's right. Yeah, when you're a total loser, you can only win, right? So the first customer was Roy Eltham, which didn't surprise us. So we took part of his paycheck until he got to checkout, and then he got hit with $350 of shipping fees to San Diego. So
Technically, I'm not the first customer yet because I haven't checked out my
bummer.
cart. I'm not going to pay $350 or $100 for shipping.
There was a new
Not just to test the site. Yeah.
there was a model railroad for the first recipient. Bummer. So anyway, you guys will be able to register for the P2 live forums now here on the events page. I'm going to try to keep I just varied the pictures, but obviously there are no topics right now. Everything is general discussion. So make yourself at home here. And in regards to shopping, there are a lot of new products here on the website, and a few things I'll tell you because a lot of you are dealing with supporting us, thankfully, on the forums and out in the public and picking up the trash that we drop all over the place, etc. So when someone comes in here and they click on P2, they'll get the P2 family of products, and there are about 22 items, new products in here right now. Everything we've been talking about, plus some other stuff.
When's the mini breakout going to be in stock?
Is that this one right here?
Yeah, that one's not in stock, and the edge boards
What?
aren't in stock.
Well, I'm going to go to Rockland tomorrow, so I'll find out. Yeah, so the Edge and the Johnny 64020, the Johnny Mac, those PCBs arrive today. And since you pointed that out, for people that want to order things that are out of stock, we have a difficult situation for you. And because this software is not connected yet to our business software inside, we upload all the quantity on hand every 6 minutes, and it doesn't communicate with our inventory system yet. So when you come across something that's out of stock like this, and you really want to get it, you have two choices. You can join the wait list, all right, and you'll be notified when this number is greater than 0, or you can call us. So we're happy to talk to you, and you can talk to Chantel and Christina, and anyone who knows them knows that they're absolutely wonderful to speak with. So call us. Lots of other little shops like us don't take calls, but our phone lines are open. So that's one way to get it faster. I don't know who will get their product first, if you call us and place the pre-order or a back order, or if you join the wait list. So that's, yeah.
Just a quick question about the P2, these the edge modules that we're looking at here. Are they going to have the last two tabs sliced, as was discussed in one of the previous calls? Or
yes. This is a photoshopped version of that version that several of you have, where they say no connect. But yeah, those are not connected. And then Chip, what other changes were made?
Well, we've designed a new board. Michael has doesn't need any kind of modification, and the back is way better because the ground plane is completely contiguous. So it's going to spread heat a lot better, so the chip should be able to run faster. And those are going to be in when, Ken?
The PCB should have arrived today from Taiwan, so I'll be in Rockland tomorrow. And the 64020 board, there are still some in stock, but people quit buying them because they ran out of edges, P2 edges. But these also come in stock. The PCB comes in stock today at Parallax, so we have to build them. So Thursday and Friday, there's really no delay in building these things. This should go very quick. We've built them before, and
the mini one will also be there.
those should be. We were making them last week, so I'm not sure why they're not here. That was the big tape the back and hide the vias and run it through the selective solder. So those should be in stock. I'll find out.
Ken,
Yes.
it
Hi,
seems
Carol.
like there's a problem logging on to the new site. It won't take my regular username and password. Do we have to
Ye-
make a new account on it?
Yeah, you have to make a new account.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
bummer.
I'm having the same problem. I have a list that is in my checkout and I can't get to it.
Oh, so the old website, since you mentioned, is at www1, I think.
Yeah, there's a 1 added to the www for getting to the old version of the store.
Oh, funny, the new one, it redirected me. So right now, Jim, our IT guy, is trying to restore the old one at a URL.
You can click the access old Parallax site button.
Oh, great. Thanks,
Works
Roy.
great.
You're hired.
That's what I did to try checking the shipping on the old site versus the new site. And the old site is totally fine. But I couldn't order the things I wanted from the old site.
Yeah, looking at this makes me almost sick. It was nearly impossible to change anything in a big series of negotiations to achieve such simple things. And then also, if you're making something like a product and you would like us to share it, we have this customer success, probably call it more like customer products or customer applications. And I quickly put a few things in here from prior years. But the few of these products of like these Aqua AI robotic fish, this is being done by Riley and Matteo, who are sometimes here. That's a Norwegian biofarm, fish farm monitoring robot, I guess. And then, of course, this is a project that's been seen on the forums, this robotic laser for tissue treatment. So there's cool stuff there. And there's a lot for education. So if any of you deal with teachers, this is super important. There's a lot of really good getting started material for them. And we talk about the different languages they might want to use. This did not exist on the old website, but here's our take on Python, for example. So I think teachers will find this useful. And then the links over to the Learn tutorials are there too. So please do help us and give us any feedback or fixes you find. I know there's a lot of them, and any preferences or places you thought we really messed up that we can make better, we will also do.
Hey, Ken, I have an announcement.
Hi, Chip.
I just posted a version 35. It's what I've been trying to get out for weeks and weeks. And I didn't get through every file. I'll go through that later and make sure they all compile. A lot of the plot syntax has changed. So I made some changes to some of the subfiles in that folder, but it's up there now in that Pnut Spin2 latest. And we'll get this into the Propeller tool pretty soon, but now debug, it's all anti-aliased, and I added a Q-sign, cosine command to Spin2, and there are lots of other little things. And it's all current with the documentation right now. I just have to add the debug MIDI display, which is going to take me a few hours. But if you go there, you can, there are lots of examples in the documentation of how the debug stuff works, and you can just, copy and paste them from the doc file, the Google Doc file, right into the Pnut app, and you can run them.
So just come straight into the Google Doc and then retrieve the examples chip.
Yeah, we'll go down to about 3/4 the way.
All right, still loading.
I have a quick question about the Pnut interface. So you're sending commands from the Propeller board back to the PC through the USB interface?
Yep.
Yeah.
So 2
What,
megabaud serial.
2 megabaud?
Yeah, and it's all just textual. You can look in that debug window and see what it's sending.
Okay.
Okay, go down, Ken, a little bit more. Do page downs.
Okay. Or I could do find too.
Right. Well, you're almost there. So a little further.
Still loading.
Okay, so I've gone through every single example. Okay, wait, you're skipping. There's a graphic there that didn't load yet.
Oh, wow.
Go look at that scope XY. Just down a little bit. So I've updated the syntax in some places to make things just better to use in the long run. Mainly the plot thing changed quite a bit. But it's all, everything, there's nothing's drawn that's not anti-aliased anymore. Everything looks nice.
That is super, Chip. And then the code for this is right here?
Yeah, you just copy that into Pnut and eventually the Propeller tool, and it'll do that. It'll look better though.
Wow.
And go down a little bit more. Yeah, there's the, okay, keep going. Yeah, see, that's everything. Go, and maybe go down to, actually go down to the graphics. That's new. Go down to bitmap. It's a few pages down. Is it still loading?
This is really nice, Chip.
Thanks. I hope you guys like it. It's so much work went into this, and it's all just right, I think. I don't know of any bugs. Just this morning, I realized in doing the graphic stuff, there's bit ordering issues for small bit fields for when you're interfacing with graphics formats. So I changed the way the packed data works, and it's documented in there. So now you can actually tell it to, like, within a byte, you know, reverse the order of the bits or the double bits or the nibbles. And as it unpacks everything, it will do that so that you don't have to do any monkey motion to, you know, if you have like a BMP file or something and you want to send it over, you don't have to play with bit fields at all. It can unravel it for you.
Nice.
Now, so go down, Ken, a few more. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
now we're in the bitmap. So go down. This is
Wow.
how the bitmap loads. You have like there's like 8 directions you can load it from, and 8 or 6, it's 8, and then 8 of those versions scroll automatically also. So as you feed pixels, you can get all kinds of behavior out of it. Okay, go down a little more.
That's just so fun. I hate to leave it behind.
Yeah.
So apologies for the slow load time.
Okay,
here.
there we go.
My computer's a mess.
Go up a little bit so we can see the LUT 1 and 2. So these are the different modes. So this is what LUT 1 is a 1-bit mode, and LUT 2 is a 2-bit, or in other words, a 4-color mode, and then a 16-color mode, and a 256-color mode. And right below is the code. Go down just a little bit, and we'll see the code that loads these things.
Suggestion, Chip, in the chat from Lachlan was put some of these animated examples up front, up top.
Oh, at the top of the documentation?
Yeah, so they're
Yeah.
1 or 2 of them could load right away
Okay,
with the code example.
Yeah, you need to put some on your website too.
Ah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now that a monkey can do it, I'm going to be all over it.
Yeah, you need to get some of that eye candy out there.
You got it.
Yeah. So see, these are the graphics modes. Look at, we have all kinds of different display modes. We have like hue or like HSV modes that go from like black to white, and or white to saturation, or black to saturation, and then we have 8 and 16-bit modes that do this. You can go down a little more.
Now, Chip,
Anyway,
this
that's-
is really cool for displaying on a PC and debugging and showing sensor values or whatever. Are there
Oh,
other
yeah,
uses for this?
Whatever you want. I mean, go to the little example I wrote. Go. It's at the top of this section.
Well, what I'd like to be able to do is drive this to a display.
Well, I saw a demo the other day on the website. Some guy was using it, debug with an IMU to show the tilt and roll of a board. Have y'all seen that?
Oh, good. Good.
No. Could you paste a link to that?
I'll try and find it again. It's on the forum somewhere.
Yeah, it was just posted yesterday or this morning
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
on the
Neat.
P2 forum right near the top.
So these
Go
images up again, Chip?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. A little bit more. So to the demo. There's a demo that starts this section. That little thing there, that little flag, it just shows how it sets up.
Okay, I
Oops.
just ripped right on by it. Sorry. Again, super lethargic document.
Well, it's because of your internet, right?
I think it's all your embedded animated GIFs.
These things are small. That little flag graphic is like, it's like, I want to say 50K. There's all these things are pretty compact. But anyway, you can see a little program there that sets up the bitmap and the size and aspect ratio, and then it just feeds it those twin bit patterns, and then it scrolls and everything. So it's real easy. I mean, you could use this for any kind of, like, if you're trying to simulate what a like a rolling text display would look like or something, you can do it really easily using the bitmap.
What are those 12 states you are referring to?
It's all we can do. It's either that or just blue.
So the
I think I have 13 on there, actually.
and then the Pnut is right there in the forums, right? In
Yeah.
that first link? Okay.
Yeah, well, maybe show people where.
All right.
Just grab the zip file, and I'm going to go through and make sure that all of the files in there compile properly, because I've made little changes, here and there to the debug stuff anyway. Right, the second one down, yes.
If it looked like the document title wasn't updated with your version number.
Wait, say that again, Stephen?
It looked like the document title wasn't updated with the correct version number.
This document?
34U.
Yep.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, let me go in there and fix that. Let's see, Ken, are you there? Go to the top.
Yep. I can fix it. Oh, I don't have edit access. It's for you.
There.
Okay, and so
Now I can get rid of this too.
here's the zip file, so you can go grab that,
Because I just,
download and install. Oh, and all the examples are in here too. Is that right, Chip?
well, a lot of them and a lot of older stuff, but it's best. I didn't put every one of those examples in because it's just too much. You can
Yeah.
copy and paste them right out of the docs.
Yeah, it's redoing work.
Has anybody had trouble with the docs being 16-bit characters in PDF views?
You mean like 16-bit characters for what looks like ASCII?
Correct. I try and cut and paste, and it cut and paste really badly into editors. Is that
Oh,
something I did, or is that the document?
That could happen maybe in something like Propeller tool because it's more sophisticated, but in my little Pnut program, it only sees 8, it can't handle any more data than just 8-bit characters. So
I was literally trying to paste it into like VS Code from the document. The previous version.
Jeff, do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I was thinking that he was mentioning or referring to the Propeller tool, but it sounds like it doesn't involve any of our tools. It's the Google Doc and VS Code, you said?
Correct.
It might be copy pasting on a Mac doesn't work.
I basically generated a PDF by printing the document. And then from the PDF, I try to copy and paste, and I get Unicode characters.
Yeah, because you converted it to a PDF.
That shouldn't
That
cause-
makes it Unicode. Yeah, it does.
It does, really?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure everything inside of a PDF is Unicode. for text.
Well, how come cut and paste works from all other documents?
I don't know.
There's a bit of an inconsistency there yet.
It
Maybe
might
it's
depend
not
on what editor you're pasting into.
No, I can take other PDFs and paste into VS Code. So I'm wondering if it's identifying its 16-bit code properly, maybe?
Might
I don't know.
UTF-8 instead of UTF-16.
Sometimes when you copy, it includes metadata like formatting. And with some apps, now you have to actually tell it to paste as plain text only to drop the meta formatting characters.
Yes, I understand.
So Ken, there's a problem on the site where I'm logged in, but it still says login up at the top.
Oh,
and when I
okay.
click that, I go to the login page and it tells me you're logged in as Roy. You want to log out? But it won't let me go to my orders and address book and stuff page like I used to be able to.
Huh.
I tried
Okay.
logging out and logging back in. It still does the same thing. It just says login at the top.
Do you happen to have a screen capture video software? Of course you do. Would it be too much work to grab a capture of that for us?
And I can capture screenshots easily.
Yeah, whatever's
video,
super easy.
A video of it would be more difficult.
Yeah.
Hey, Roy, I'm curious if you get back to that situation where it says log out, or excuse me, log in when you know you're already logged in, try doing like a cashless refresh on the web page, like Control-Shift refresh. Let's see if that changes it.
While you do that, also, we should thank Stephen Morocco's son and Stephen for giving us a lot of photography.
Yeah, those are awesome pictures.
Yeah.
I did a Control-Shift-R on the page and it still says login, even though I'm definitely logged in already.
So thanks, Stephen. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. Oh, and Jonathan Shook, I got this book. I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm going to start reading this.
Yeah, it's a really cool book.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get everything else up to the point where I can actually implement some of those algorithms, which means, you know, productizing a version of something with a P2 inside it that has the right audio interfaces and that kind of thing.
Oh, that'd be good.
I'm still early on the curve. So I have a couple questions for you though. With the debugging support you're adding, I think we now have a case of if you need to drop down to PASM, it's really the only thing that'll do. And if you want to have rapid prototyping and debug support, SPIN2 is going to be about the best tool. And so, as with a lot of things, you know, I would like to stay in SPIN2 or just Spin until I need to do the performance critical or timing critical things, and then call to those things like subroutines. And I figured out how to do that, of course, but you have to do some, you know, some absolute addressing and you know, some manual handshaking of return values and things like that using things like the call spin function.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see it? Would it be easy enough to add a function-like version of call that automatically manages stack and that kind of thing? So as long as you didn't go too crazy with it, you'd be able to return values from it and pass values to it.
Ah, I see. Well, I don't know. Yeah, that could be done, but I don't know that it would really be that necessary because you have access to variables symbolically as it is, right? And so if you have any kind of agreement that, you know, you're going to set something into a variable, you're going to call this code, and he's going to do something to that variable, and then you're going to use that when it returns, then that was the intent. But I don't know to kind of turn it in. Well, I think you could make it a function by putting a wrapper, you know, put a spin wrapper around some inline assembly. That would be one way to achieve that. But I don't have like a good picture in my mind of why to do more than what we've already done. I mean,
yeah, I think looking at more examples might help me.
Yeah, we're really we're still in like BC as examples go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I totally understand the problem. You were mentioning debugging from PASM, but doesn't the debug feature work in PASM?
No, the ideal here is to be able to stay in the high level mindset for everything except where you need to drop down to PASM. And then when you need to carve out little slivers of functionality to call into PASM with, that you can treat it like a function without having to do all of the, address juggling. Like I have my inputs in this register and outputs in this register, and they just happen to know where those are. In terms of managing code and complexity, it's a lot easier to say, well, I'm passing a function in a stack-oriented way and think of it that way. So it's really just more of programmer ergonomics. Not that you can't do it now. I'm just wondering if we could tidy that part up a little bit so that you can basically make a call to PASM that acts just as it would if you were calling another spin function.
I'll have to think. I mean, it certainly is possible to go deeper than we've gone. I don't know if it would, if it could wind up costing, more cycles or what. I'll have to look about it. I think I know what you're asking for. What you really want is just a way to interface to assembly language where you're dealing with functions instead of calls, so that you have parameters in and parameters out.
Exactly. But just being able to pass the values would be one layer, and being able to return a value would be icing on the cake, really.
Okay, I think I have an idea of how that could work.
Because you can always pass a return value as a parameter, right? To pass a register address as a parameter.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and that can be done now just by making a spin method and putting inline PASM in there, and then having it just be that interface. But I'll have to think about what we can do, and what kind of, it's going to put some kind of burden on the assembly code to do some housekeeping, I think.
Yeah, it would probably be better as a separate function. I mean, we've already got 3 variants there for passing stack initializers and stuff, but
okay.
I wouldn't want to burden the call function particularly, but if there was an alternate that would be like a PASM func or something like that, that would be cool.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so let me think about that. It's going to take some thinking to come up with like how that would work and what it would look like and what the advantage would be.
So you're asking for this as an alternative to inline assembly so that you can reuse existing PASM routines?
Not as an alternative, more as like an ergonomic wrapper around assembly. So when you say inline, maybe I haven't seen the examples of that. If you could just drop inline assembly in and know that all of the stack state is going to be managed in a safe way, that would be okay. If I could just do that in the middle of a PASM function and know it will be okay, but I haven't seen a reliable pattern of that yet.
Yeah, it is, there's a lot of, the most complex thing in the whole spin interpreter is the handling of stack for call and return. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there because there's the potential for aborts and it's that's like the most monkey motion. And if I go in there to modify something, it actually takes me like a day to re-spool in my head how it works so that I can touch it again and make it do something different. And if I have to do a lot of changes, it can take like several days. So I don't know that we're going to be able to handle it any more efficiently than the system's already handling it at the method interface.
Yeah, it's really just more about cerebral burden of shifting from the stack-oriented mindset to the register space mindset. Right?
Okay, well, maybe we can leverage, the code that's already there anyway, and maybe just kind of hide the call, or just kind of sublimate what's going on so that you get what you need. Because I understand it's hard to think about too many things, and it would be nice to get rid of layers of stuff.
Right. And a new PASM programmer who's familiar with Spin we'll have to make a mental shift, and they'll have to start allocating and reserving positions in memory and managing it like a separate resource and correlating where it fits together. And it's like you have a puzzle in one place and a puzzle in another, and now they're connected puzzles. And you just want to reduce it down to one puzzle if you can.
Okay, I'm going to be thinking about that. That's something that probably is worth doing.
My last question, and I'll be quiet. I was looking at your code. I'm learning a lot from looking at the contributed code. Thanks, everyone. It's an amazing resource to actually be able to look at the interpreter code, for example. One of the things I haven't figured out yet, it's not clear in my head yet, is how to get a streamer writing a bit field to a pin group. And I know that there's something like that happening in the DVI driver, but I'm suspicious there's a converter, a pixel converter of some kind doing the work of that. I haven't really quite understood it yet. If there's an example out there, or if I'm trying to do something we can't do, then I'd like to know. But the gist is, buffering a lot of data out to a video device with arbitrary pin assignments.
Yeah, that can be done. I mean, the streamer will move things from memory to pins and from pins to memory. It can also go from ADC to memory and memory to ADC or to DAC. And it doesn't take much code to set up. You just have to understand what it does.
Yeah, it's the pin assignments mapping to the bit fields. That's the part that I'm missing so far.
You mean to the pins? Like you want to write data to a range of pins? Okay. Well, you can set up, you can position the input and output of the streamer at every 8th pin. You can make that your base. So you could output, you got IO 32 bits at starting at pin 8. Pin 8 through what would that be 30? What would be 8 plus 32? 40, 39, 8 through 39.
Yeah, that works. I mean, I have a 6-bit data group. I just throw away 2 bits and raw buffer everything. As long as I can do that, it's great.
Yeah.
I guess I just need to keep digging a little bit.
Yeah, you would just turn off the output enable for those pins you don't want to output on. And I didn't put, I would have liked to have put an extra mask in the streamer, but it was going to cost a lot of flops. And at the time I was, if we ever make a bigger, better chip, I'll add a layer of masks in there so that you can really control where the data is going. You don't have to, just block it.
Ken, we talked about this briefly. This is a 64 by 64 LED. It's quite fun to play with.
Yeah, that was the one off,
interface.
Yeah, off AliExpress, right? I ordered 2 of those.
Yeah, it comes with this. And what I'm going to try to do is, and this is just a protective skirt. These are fragile. These are 2mm pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they've got a 4-point solder on the bottom, and it's just, they're not durable. They're not, it's not going to be durable. But a protective, like a 3D printed skirt around it will make it more durable. But you can take that back frame off. And what I want to try, if I can find a reasonable portable power supply, is to make a cube, because you can take the back frame off and you can 3D print a scaffold for it. And this will take, I think, about 10 watts per panel. So it'll at half brightness, you're going to be driving 30 watts. So the power supply is going to be probably the next hard problem to solve for that. But this is easy to design around because it just has little screw holes.
Yeah.
And you can put it in whatever.
Jonathan, that's the Hub 75 connector, right? And those are cascadable. I have the driver for them. And that's what I'm working on, getting cleaned up so we can do multiple panels.
Yeah, we should compare notes, because I was working on our driver as well, but if you've got one, I'd rather use the one you've got.
Okay.
The question is the memory packing for the video,
Yes.
because it is a split 32 bank display. It doesn't make sense to reverse engineer the drawing commands at refresh. We basically have to draw into the memory in the swizzled way that it stores it for buffering.
Correct.
So I'm curious about what you got, and I'll look for you on the forums there. But I'm going to turn my mic off now. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Jonathan. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, I want to show you this, John. I made this on the back of duct tape to have flexible panel, and everyone's addressable. But I have to use 12-volt power supply on it.
That's pretty neat.
I
Yeah, all the
recommend light
LED.
batteries.
We encourage you guys keep going on the LED driver, and we'll get in stock the panels as well, so others can play with them. They're pretty cheap, and Jonathan found us the best way to get some of those, and Steven's got his board in the works too.
Carol,
Yeah,
are you using the WS2815s on your flexible panel?
2812s, aren't they?
Well, I just saw today there is also a WS2815 that takes 12 volts. That's why I asked.
Oh, no, it's because of the amount of them I'm using in the, on this size of a matrix, whatever you want to call it. You can see where I had to, this one's kind of beat up because it went through a lot of stuff with the Elevate. I had to make little loops to make them continuous. I believe they're 2812s. And then this plugs into the little controller unit for it. And there again, I had to jump wire the different strips together, but it makes it completely, every LED is directly addressable. The only thing is, if you want to make a moving picture, it's a hell of a long time to program anything for it. And I use Blockly Prop on it.
Hey, about the streamer, Jonathan was asking, we really don't need a mask. If you can control your data that you're outputting so that the unwanted bits stay at 0, you don't have to do anything. You can then use that pin for any other purpose. Because remember, the output states are ORed together. So if the streamer is contributing a 0, it's never going to eventuate any pin activity.
What memories did the streamer run from?
The hub memory.
Okay, thank you. That's probably how I can do multi-panel, larger multi-panels than 4 at a time.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be 2 different versions for us on this, Stephen, the way that the memory is buffered. Because I noticed that the panels that people have put together, the 32 by 64s to get the full 64 by 64, has a different memory layout. We'll probably have to have a different pluggable, like rasterizer for that.
Yes, there's the different chips that are used on the different boards all require different layouts. And so the driver has to be written to allow the user to specify which layout he's using, and then we'll transform behind the scenes. So, yep, in progress.
Jonathan, I'm curious about your application. Is it for fun or hobby, or is there some product in mind?
I haven't tried to, label it yet, but well, it's kind of in the spirit of what Parallax has kind of stood for in a way. It's opening up other people's creative potential, but in a place that I enjoy dabbling in, which is signal processing and acoustics and making music. But I have a lot more fun building the things as it is. So what I want to do is make it so that anybody who wants to get down into PASM and write a DSP algorithm for any kind of synthesis or something pluggable in the Eurorack sandbox has a platform that they can do that with, and that they don't have to worry about making sure that their op amps are matched to the voltage standards for Eurorack. They don't have to worry about making sure they have high bit rate and high fidelity ADC and DAC. Thankfully, the low frequency control signals will work just fine at 12 bits. We can have as many channels of that as we want off the P2. For the audio stuff, as Chip mentioned before, we'll have to pair it up with an off-board chip. But there are plenty out there that are used quite a lot in the Eurorack scene, and we just have to pair them up, put a driver on them, and they'll just send bits over as fast as we want. But I want to build the hardware and create kind of a play space for hardware dabblers, music dabblers, code dabblers to say there's this the scaffolding of tools and designs they can play with. And they can design panels to put in Eurorack. They can plug it into their brain board that's P2 powered. They can write DSP algorithms. They can pull in samples. There's just a lot to do there. So I'm not trying to boil the ocean. I'm trying to get the hardware in place first and go from there. And anybody else who feels really compelled to jump in and help with this, I mean, great. I can't promise it's going to be financially lucrative. I mean, I have a day job, you know, and I have to focus on that to stay gainfully employed. But when I'm not doing that, I'm doing this. And so I think the answer to your question is all of the above in some degree, but really getting the reference hardware platform in place is the first step. And that's where I'm at right now.
That's great. Yeah, keep it fun. I'd like to tie in tone detection for acoustic instruments, clarinet, with some of this LED driving. That's my plan. But, you know, I have to wait till the professionals come in and provide enough examples too.
Ken, got a question. What's happened with the wireless programming?
Oh, hey, Mike. Good to see you. It works. Let's see. Jeff would know, unless Michael's here. So probably Jeff can answer that.
Yeah, I don't think Michael's here. I haven't done anything with it since our meeting last time. And I think that Michael was, well, let's see, we produced the adapters, right? For the
yeah, is it a hardware question or a use question?
Yeah, I know that Mike has an outstanding question to me that I passed on to Michael because I didn't know the answer. I'm not sure if he missed it or not. I never saw the follow-up on it. Do you remember, is that what the issue is?
Well, I haven't seen the adapter.
Oh, the adapter, the hardware. Okay, it's here. Let me find it and then I'll share it.
Mike's on right now.
I think this mic is just looking for the hardware adapter.
No, Michael.
Yeah, Michael's here. He just chatted.
Here's the adapter. That's what you're looking for, right, Mike?
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm having fun, you know, playing with the Wi-Fi module and the P1, and I really would like to have it available by playing around with the P2 as well.
So from functionality perspective, yeah, Michael was updating some code to make this work properly. As I recall earlier this week, a lot of things have happened this week.
Yeah, and Michael and I are supposed to get together to merge everything into the repo. There's been a few independent changes to the source firmware for the Wi-Fi module that we haven't totally embraced yet. A couple of them caused some problems, so we had to do some quick finagling behind the scenes to get everything figured out. And I think that's what Michael's working on right now, trying to true everything up so that we can, you know, provide the new firmware via the repo as well as, you know, as a download on the product page.
Thank you. That pretty much answers my question.
Give us a week. Yeah, Michael's here quietly working on the new firmware, he says.
To jump in with
You went mute.
Still hear me? Sorry. I closed the site, deleted all the cookies and whatnot related to the site, and then went back to it and I could log in, and now it just says log out at the top. It still doesn't show my name, so I can go to my page to edit addresses and view past orders and stuff like that. But it does say log out, so it knows I'm logged in now.
Yeah, I just made an order and got 2 items that are supposed to be being shipped So at least the shipping software is working.
So
yeah, I'm still getting. I got my express order up to $412 now.
Yeah,
So-
I had express of $75, something like that, but I just did regular ground.
well, I've got two guys looking at it.
Troy, you just need to handle it like a man. I mean, you are living with Pralex since what, 10 years, 15? Just take those $300. I mean,
What do we
Sorry,
say?
but no.
An investment in Parallax is an investment in oneself.
Sure, I'll invest if I get product for it. I'm not going to pay $400 for shipping, though.
Oh, that's a fair exchange.
Especially when it should be like $8.
I didn't have any trouble. I got UPS ground and it was only $14.95.
Yeah, UPS prices are fine, but priority mail is faster and cheaper to my house from Parallax. I get priority mail in like a day. UPS takes like 3 or 4 days.
yeah, and now you have to pay for it.
Now mine is always slow no matter which way it goes because the Auburn post office is making extra money by charging people for storage.
Yeah, I'm right next to the San Diego distribution center for the U.S. Postal Service. Like the giant distribution center that's central to San Diego is 2 or 3 miles from my house. So I get stuff very quickly if I order it priority mail.
Hmm. Wow.
Hey, Jeff, since you're here, I know you've been working through getting a Proptool packaged up. Do you want to provide any update on that?
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask if I could do that.
Oh, sure you can.
So for the past few weeks, I had a whole bunch of things that I intended to work on and get squeezed into Propeller Tool. And I was held up by one thing that was a lot hairier than I thought it would be, and that was proper syntax highlighting for the P2, Spin2, and PASM2. And it was all due to some custom code that I wrote, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago that worked great back then. And
That's the
since
best
then,
code, 15-year-old code.
yeah, worked fantastic. Never had to look at it. But once I started trying to get the Propeller tool to, swiftly switch back and forth between different, 2 different sets of syntax rules for, if you have P1 or P2 code, all kinds of problems came about. Anyway, I've got that stuff nailed now, and I'm going to share something here. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so this is just a little example of, on the left here is the version 2.3, I think it is, of the tool, and on the right is version 2.4. And it probably doesn't look very different here, but if you look, these symbols here, which are PASM2 instructions, aren't syntax highlighted, neither is this one or these, but you can see that they are on this side. So that's just a simple little example of something that's changed. And I don't know if anybody really paid attention to it because it was kind of looking like things were highlighted properly in many cases. But what it was doing is just applying Spin1 and PASM1 rules to Spin2 code. So we still got the right color background because things didn't change that much, but there were a number of opcodes or mnemonics that just didn't come out right. So now that's all in there. And I don't know if people have, hold on, I'm trying to find something here. So there are over, let's see, this is a list of all the symbols understood by the P2 compiler. There's over 1,100 of them, and each one of them has to have a rule in the tool for how to deal with it, like what section it can be in. And I kind of, at some point, decided I needed to simplify things a little bit, and along the way ended up fixing some things too. So I'll show you an example here, something that I never really realized how much of a problem it is. So like up in the spin code, when you're typing a string, I'll just do it right here because it'll highlight it. Anyway, you can see that immediately as soon as you hit quote and start typing, it shows it as a string. Well, if you leave off the end quote, it's actually invalid. Of course, it won't compile right. And this is something that I made happen through kind of a complicated series of rules because I thought that this is the way it should work. And this time around, I couldn't figure out why I had written it that way, and finally remembered, but then finally realized I simplified it down to, if you can see on this side as I type, it doesn't highlight it as a string until you get that final quote in there. And that's actually, I think, the proper way to do it.
Yeah,
and
it's much better.
It's much better, and it simplified the rule set immensely for just that one thing. And I applied the same kind of logic to a lot of other stuff. So I really simplified things, which kind of trued it up and also improved my understanding of what is happening in the syntax rule parser. Let me see if I have any other examples here.
Yeah, having it change color once it's valid is really nice for fast typing, because you see it change to the correct color and you can just keep going. It's very nice.
Right. Also, oh yes, go ahead.
Can I make a request?
Yes.
While we're here. So I've been thinking about how to make docs easier to integrate and just easier to edit, because there's a lot of docs that are going to be built over time. And I know that Chip is using Google Docs and things, and I'm not going to try to be invasive and say, you should do it this way or that way. But the request I have is something real simple. If you would allow anywhere there's a word that if you did something like Control Shift and double clicked it or something like that, where you would open up a web browser to a web address with that word added to the URL somewhere, then people could come up with ways of adding docs that are like, say I wanted to learn about, what does the org word mean in PASM? And I just want to hold down Control Shift and double click it. If I can have it automatically open up a documentation site somewhere with that being the search term, then people could add documentation in different ways. We could experiment with that. I don't know if that's something you want to do right now, but I'm just asking if there's a way we can try some things like that so that we could make it so that you could kind of explore through the examples how PASM works.
Okay, yeah, so that's like a context-sensitive help feature, but it sounds like what you're asking is a way to make it open so that so that anybody could produce documentation and contribute for that one particular mnemonic, for example?
Yes, not something that checks to see if the word is defined or whatever, but just blindly pops up a page somewhere. And the worst case is, so anybody who's working on docs and working on how to contribute things like that, at some point it might need to be consolidated. But if you had that mechanism in place, anybody who wants to put a basic web-enabled help view together has a way then to say, go into the configuration, add their base URL, their base docs URL with their little tokenized placeholder for the search term. And then you can plug it into anything. And that actually helps other people help put experiments together to come up with a documentation system.
Okay, yeah, I'll do some thinking about that.
The simple way would be to just kind of pop up a new window with Google search on parallax site and that search term of the letter.
Well, that's immediately what I was thinking when he was suggesting this, that maybe it's something where we always, in this particular case, we know it's P2 code, so a Control Shift double click or whatever it is would generate a URL, launch a browser that says spin2 space cognate.
Right, but I would I would not want it to go to Google search because you're never going to be able to control what's there. So for example, if you wanted to release a version of the Propeller tool that, let's say the 2 versions from now, we have a prototype site somewhere, maybe Parallax hosts it, maybe someone else hosts it, but you can actually put the base URL in there so you control the content and make sure that users see exactly what you want them to see when they go look and say, what does the org, you know, what does it mean?
Yeah.
So,
are you suggesting something that where that base URL is configurable by the user?
I would say I wouldn't expose it for most users, but I would expose it for people who you want to enable to help prototype documentation support.
Okay.
So a user would probably change that and break their help system if they didn't know what it was for. But somebody who's writing up, you know, example copy for, you know, documenting write pen, they need to be able to change it and point to their local sandbox to edit and preview docs before they say, hey, check this out.
Okay.
So maybe some way that maybe an INI file and a documented way to do it somewhere would be good enough for that.
All right.
I don't know how you do it these days in Windows programming. It's been a long time since I've done that.
Yeah, that would be an interesting feature because in my code, I always have a references section at the top of the code that references all the URLs that people can go look at data on what I'm doing inside my code.
I mean, I'm just asking for something that's it shouldn't require a lot of development, but it might.
Yeah, just something to
up.
kick it off, right? Yeah.
Hey Jeff.
Okay.
I think
is the code in the new Parallax website still the alpha?
Yes. Yeah. I should have said that from the beginning. I've, as Ken knows, he's been after me to get this done for the launch, and I've been trying and kept running into problems last minute. Every last minute there could be. So I was going to get it out just before the meeting, but I think I've got things pretty solid. There's one installer issue that I'm working on that I'm hoping I can finish up here after the meeting and then get it published today. So so it'll show up on the new website and the old website as well.
All right, good deal.
Yeah, it'll be version 2.4. And then I'll show you here. So here's an example where we've got spin 2 code with some inline assembly in it. And this one was a lot of fun for me to get working because it's just kind of cool seeing assembly code in a spin method. But all the syntax highlighting works. You can kind of see if I get rid of, and it's kicked off by org and finalized by end. I don't know if anybody's written inline assembly besides just a few of us, but you could see as I erase that now it's trying to syntax highlight according to spin rules. So, and this happens to be a spin instruction also, so it gets highlighted properly. And then, of course, the same thing down here. And one other thing I wanted to point out, and then I'll be done, I think, with this, is that by convention, everybody has probably done something like this, where they always put the blocks all the way to the left, and the old highlighter would do some, you know, funny things like this, like it allows that, looks like it's fine, but it won't compile right. I have that fixed too, so that you do that, and it immediately shows you, oops, something's wrong there. That it's not even going to treat it as the type of block that you think it is.
Nice.
And there's a whole bunch of other little nitpicky stuff like this that's in there that I can't even remember. I don't know. Every day I set out and, you know, to solve like 2 or 3 major problems, and there were like 15 more that I found and fixed. One other thing is there's a whole new installer for this that is completely rewritten. It's a little bit faster, I think, and it's certainly faster for me to use. And I also have it set up to take the library and the examples of whatever we want to pack with it and put it in a user folder. This is something that
very nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
that John reminded me is a problem because it was storing everything under the program files folder. And when you go to save, or you can make the changes to those files, but what Windows is actually doing is not allowing those changes in that folder, but it's kind of like doing a little smoke and mirrors thing under the scenes and or behind the scenes, and it makes it so that it's really hard to find where is my code that I just changed from an example that came with the Propeller tool. So now, as you can see here, this is in my documents, Propeller tool examples. Right now it's fixed at this, so when you install, it automatically puts everything there. In a near future version, I'll make it so that you can configure that, of course. And actually, it might be configurable now. I just haven't tried it. So that's coming here sometime after the meeting, hopefully before I end my day.
That looks just awesome, Jeff. This is great.
Thanks.
But one question is still open. Does the new version support the debug stuff, or doesn't it yet?
I was wondering if somebody was going to ask me that. I was so held up by fixing all this crazy syntax highlighting stuff that I had going on that I wasn't able to squeeze that in. But it is the next thing I'm going to do. And I was telling Ken, he was asking me, hey, do you want to just talk about Propeller tool? And I said, I'll really have a lot more stuff to show in a couple more weeks. But we figured I better say something about this now. So I think over the next, well, I certainly by December want to have it ready. It might be ready by early next week because as soon as I can get this published, I mean, tomorrow I'll start fresh and I'm going to start working on debugging support. It will actually compile this code. It just doesn't bring up any of the debug windows because it doesn't have any of that code in it that Chip wrote.
Nice.
May I ask what the implementation language and framework are? Just curious about possibilities for cross-platform opportunities.
Oh, this is written in Delphi, just like Pnut is.
Got it.
So, and
is
it's
it
an
still
old.
the really old Delphi too?
It's a really old Delphi. Yeah, that's the other thing that I mean, we could. It's one thing that I've been looking into because you can take the later versions of Delphi and compile them across just about every platform. But
maybe you should go the other way around. You have to go back to Turbo Pascal because then we can run it under Cluso's CPM Z80 emulation.
Oh, the compiler's written in Turbo Assembler.
Oh boy.
No, Cluso has Turbo Pascal running on the P2.
Hey, Jeff,
what we'd really like to do is make an editor that you know, gets away from a hardware-based platform and you know, use web technologies instead, so that it could be used in a lot more places. Of course, we need to have the compiler written or be able to be cross-compiled or compiled to WASM or something.
Right.
What I did with a heater before he disappeared, we used that whatever editor thing and did
Inscription
on with EM script and basically run OpenSpin all in JavaScript in the browser. It was working. You can search in the forum for editor
Video
16 or something.
But like my wife's addicted to Subway Surfer.
What was it that that you ran through in Scripton?
They took OpenSpin, my C++ code, and converted it through Inscription to run as JavaScript.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to do that.
Yeah, and I edited some stuff for Heater to make it more friendly to that. so that
All
he
right.
keeps it running all the time and then just passes it new files. And I had to add a bunch of stuff to clean it up every time it compiled so it would go back to a good state and not leak a whole bunch of memory, because normally it just exits and frees everything after every compile. But
yeah, but it was working really nice, and the
yeah,
only thing I had to do was kind of put some
it won't
my web
convert
server
x86 though.
put
And yeah,
thing, token to kind of save files. But basically, it was working pretty nice. But in
yeah.
my opinion,
Yeah, and
running this
chips.
stuff in the browser is not the solution. We have to run it on the P2. That's the point. Running it on, oh God, we can run it in browser. Yeah, fuck this. We still are bound to the Windows or Linux or updates, or we should be able to run something on a P2.
Yeah, but that won't
There
work in
is
the
the
classroom
goal.
environment. They need it to run from like an iPad in a browser and compile it all and then dump it into the chip.
Hey, Jeff, can I ask a tech question?
Yes.
Right now I've got a customer project where it's two P1s that are talking to each other through an RS-45 link. It would be really nice if I could assign COM port by tabs in the editor.
You know what? Ken just got some experience with that on, I think because the basic stamp editor, I may do that so that you could have multiple stamps and set the code to automatically download to the proper stamp based on COM port. And I told them at that time, I think, yeah, that was a feature that I think a lot of people didn't use. I used it a lot for a while for a few projects, and I really want to have that in the Propeller tool also. So and so you're talking about like with the port directive, have you probably remember that.
When I want to download to the master device, I go set the COM port to that and go. And I change it around, download the updated code for the slave device and download it, then start running tests. It would be nice too one of the things is, I'm so accustomed to using PST that if I could open, maybe have in the context menu of the tab and open PST for that COM port. Now this is assuming you get a COM port by tab, so that I can say, because I have debug outputs in both sides, but I have to manually go to the start menu to open a second copy of PST and then assign it its COM port and do all that jazz. It's not, it's not a lot of work, but it just seems to get in the way when you're in the flow.
Hey, how about a sneaky comment pragma that just said what your COM port was in the source code itself?
Yeah.
We used to do that with basic stamp, right?
Yeah, that's what we did with the basic stamp. Hey, let me share my screen again, because there might be something that, it's kind of, it may or may not work to your liking, but you can, if you can have two instances of the Propeller tool open, during that session, you can open up preferences. Here, let me do it through the menu so you can see which one I'm working on. And go here and say, I want this one on COM 30. And on this side, I want this one to be on COM 1. And now it'll be fixed to those each time I go to download. In fact, I'll try to do yeah, you can see here, it tried only COM 1. It never paid attention. Over here, it's checking COM 30, which I don't know what it's hanging up on right now, but hold on a second. Let me disconnect that port.
Hey, Jeff, in 2 weeks, could we put you on for another presentation? And you can keep going now. I just want to get the calendar loaded.
Let's do 3 weeks.
You got it. Then you could do John's multi-com.
We got Thanksgiving. We got Thanksgiving week coming.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah.
In 3 weeks, Jeff, we should be able to get all this serial stuff working for debug.
Right. Yeah, I think so too.
You're talking the 16th, right?
I'm 1, 2. Well, I was thinking like December 9th.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh, you're thinking like 3 working weeks. I was thinking 3 calendar weeks.
Escaping.
Anyway,
We'll work it
yeah,
out.
so that sounds good. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to commit to that and be back and show some things. So John, will this work for you?
Yeah, I guess I could do that. I am set up for a single instance. That way, you know, I'll go out to a folder and just double click on a file and I know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But I could do that while because I'm kind of in the final throes of this project. It's taken like, it's been like what you went through with your syntax highlighting. There's some little niggly things that have been, you know, giving me fits on this. And I want to wrap this up.
Yeah.
And then you can get to that long list of suggestions I gave you for the propeller tool.
Yeah, I know. That's on the list. Some of them, excuse me, are small enough that I think I can get them in here.
Yeah, knock down, you know, like, you know, toolbar, easy peasy, right? It's just hooks to the code that already exists.
Yeah.
Not that you don't already have enough work to do, Jeff, but somebody was commenting the other day and I responded, hey, the P1 manual is really good. Are we going to have a P2 manual like the P1 manual?
Well, we have to do a lot of talking about that to figure out what we're going to do. Certainly, one of the big jobs we have up ahead of us in the very near future is documentation on the P2. And we haven't talked about whether we're going to make a printed manual or have it all online. So I don't know if I would like to have something that speaks in the voice of like the P1 manual though.
Yeah,
or
well,
something similar.
I'm old, so I'm old school, and I like having physical books. I have 2 or 3 copies of the P1 manual, and one is usually in my car. I mean, I'm such a nerd that when I'm waiting online for something in a restaurant, I have a Propeller manual in my hand going through, because, you know, with what P2 has done is kind of reinvigorated me to write more PASM because it's so nice and easy so, you know, I'll say, and I think I said this during my presentation a month or so ago, if you haven't tried PASM, the P2 is the best place to go because that PASM is even easier than the first one. And by using inline assembly, you can test things in little tiny clean snippets. And to something Jonathan was talking about earlier, you know, you can send parameters and the inline PASM can pick them up and you can update result variables from your PASM in an inline function and it'll go back. I use it all the time. In fact, my I2C, my core I2C object is 4 inline PASM routines. There's start, stop, you know, write and read. And I think there's probably block versions of the write and read. So there may be 6, but there is very little spin code. The whole thing is inline PASM so that we can control the clock speed and because it was just so easy.
Yeah, I see. Well, that's pretty interesting. I haven't actually had the luxury of coding any inline assembly yet. I've just looked at examples that Chip wrote and I think that you wrote, but I'm looking forward to getting into it. I didn't realize it was
it's
so
funny
easy.
you call it a luxury, and I guess technically it is vis-a-vis other processors. But you know, to me, it's a huge game changer because again, you know, maybe Jonathan was saying, you know, with Spin, it's such a nice, easy, elegant language. It could be, you know, somebody was referring to it as a rapid, you know, development tool. It is. But in those cases where, you know, like for what I found in particular is that doing SPI with the smart pins is a pain in the backside. So I don't. I just do it in inline assembly because it almost is less code and it's just easier to deal with and understand. And it's fantastic. I like that. You can blast out stuff as fast as you want. I'm working on, you know, stuff like, in fact, I was looking at Ray's OLED code because some of that I wanted to see if I could learn from it for an OLED that I'm working on, that I'm doing, again, a spin driver, but where I need the speed, I'd stick in a little bit of inline assembly. Now, inline assembly rocks. I like it. Yeah, in the context of, I know it's not a new thing, but in the context of an interpreted language, it really is. That's a thing when I'm explaining to other programmers, I don't think they quite understand. And once they do, that is kind of different. So,
yeah, it's really nice to have that feature. I love that. I never thought that we would have that.
I didn't either. And I was like, wow, we can do that. This is fantastic. Like for me in particular, it's really great for the education because sometimes I'm thinking, okay, what is this really doing to a bit flag? Well, now I know. I can tell, especially with all the bit manipulation stuff where you can write the C or the Z into any bit of a return variable. And say, oh, okay, that's what that did. Yeah, it's really, really good from a learning standpoint. In fact, Chip, I would suggest, if you want to, put on your teacher's hat, it would be kind of fun to do, hey, let's learn some assembly seminars and, do it in little tiny digestible bits where you say, okay, here's a routine. Like, for example, SPI, when you're going to write to a shift register. Okay, here's how you do it in inline assembly so that instead of, I think I found, I'm always running at 200 megahertz, so if you do it in pure spin, you get about a 600 kilohertz clock. Well, then if you change it to inline assembly, you can go super fast and get megahertz clocks.
Well, yeah, you can start leveraging hardware too and make it go real fast.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the inline assembly in Spin 2. If I understand correctly, it's pre-assembled ahead of time and loaded into cog memory or loot memory or something. So you have a limited amount of it, right? Like if you compile a really large program with piles and piles of inline assembly, it'll eventually run out of inline assembly space, right?
Yeah, I think registers, you can use registers 0 up through 12F for all of your code and variables. And then there is a 16 register buffer there for transacting variables between the spin, and they're all symbolic, and they have the same names as all your local symbols, and they become registers when the inline assembly runs, and then they get copied back to the variables afterwards, because it can happen quick with a block read and write.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that your entire program is limited on inline assembly. You're not like loading the inline assembly in each time you run.
Right. If you want something bigger, you need to just do it in a DAT section, and then you can call it. And I mean, you could even call it from inline assembly, or you could call it from spin.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you'd call it from inline assembly because it would be going to another cog, right? Unless it's hub exec.
No, if it's just code, it would just execute it.
No, what I'm saying is if I did a DAT section of PASM2 code and that loads into a different cog and it's running, I can't call it from inline assembly.
Right. I was thinking it was hub code.
Yeah, with hub code, you can definitely call it. I'm just saying to call PASM in another cog, you have to do a message box. You can't do a direct call.
Yeah. But when inline executes, some provisions are made so that you can go and repurpose the streamer. You can call out to, which calling out to hub code would do. You have like all but I think you have 6 hardware stack levels you can use. You can do a lot of stuff, and then when you come back, as long as you don't mess with the registers and the LUT that the interpreter uses. You can do a lot of stuff and come back scot-free, no problem.
So Chip and Roy, just so I understand, because this was a misunderstanding on my part, when I write a program that has a bunch of inline assembly in it, all of those bits of inline assembly that I've written are stuffed into the cog ahead of time.
Yeah, the block move is used to, put them into the cog along with a copy of your first 16 local long variables. And then when you're done, those long variables are copied back from register memory into hub memory.
But the code, I see when you and I had a conversation once, Chip, and the way I interpreted what you said was when I call a method that has inline assembly, those variables are shuttled over and that block of assembly is shuttled over into the cog and it runs, and then when everything is returned, that memory is, you know, freed up back in, but you're saying that's not happening. That code already exists before I made the call.
Yeah, it's sitting there right in line with the interpreted, with the bytecode. So it just does a thing, and then from where the bytecode stream left off, it just does a block read and moves those into wherever you set the org. If you set no org, you just set org, it would move it into 0, and then it calls it, and then when it returns, it comes back to the interpreter.
I think what John and Chip, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not, the code isn't sitting in the cog.
No, it's loaded, you know, so that's why you can do hundreds of different inline assembly
Okay,
things.
good. All right, so my understanding was correct.
Yes.
You know, I'm not going to find myself running out of inline code space.
As long as you don't use too much at once, you're okay.
Right.
Yeah,
That's the limit, is the size of a piece of inline code, but not the overall bits of it. So if I have bunches of little 10-line, you know, methods, that's not going to be an issue.
No.
So wait, back up. So you are copying in PASM code into the cog for inline assembly. You're not, you're literally shuttling it all in, running it, and then, you know, erasing it when the next inline assembly gets called because you're shuttling over a different inline assembly and overwriting.
Right.
Okay,
right.
so it's like Fcache in Flex GUI or
Is
Flex
it fair
Prop.
to say this is like regexec or regload? How similar is that handler to inline assembly?
It's the same code. You can see it in the interpreter. So regload just loads some code, and the code that it loads has like a 2-word descriptor in front of it. There's an org and a number of registers, and it loads that many longs at that offset into the cog. So regload will load, and then regexec will load and jump to it.
So it's literally the same thing, just without the function call syntax.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And how long the assembler code can be in an inline assembler?
It's
Well,
120.
Well, 130 hex. So
yeah.
256 plus 48, what's that? 280 something instructions.
Well, that's basically fine, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of room. And you can, you know, once you load something in, it just stays there until it gets overwritten. So you could write all kinds of terminate, stay resident programs that are executing via like timer interrupts. You know, you can have your inline assembly start up a timer interrupt, and it will, you know, execute every so often, because the spin interpreter is designed to handle any kind of interruption. And it even has breaks in the interpreter, like where we're doing multiple Cordic operations. It does it has to, what is it called, stall I before it goes in, because you don't want to interrupt when something's in the Cordic, because something else might try to use the Cordic and blow everything up, and then you'll get garbage later. So you have to do a stall I when you use in the spin environment, when you do a Cordic operation. So we do a stall I, the Cordic operation, then an allow I and a no op, so that any pending interrupts get to flush out at that point and execute. And then we do another stall I, and then a Cordic operation and a final allow I. So the interpreter never is going to hog the time up for very long.
So get my my request on the function parameter semantics for call or something like call earlier. This inline PASM sounds like a mythical beast. I haven't seen it in the docs yet. Is there somewhere I can look to become enlightened yet?
No, I mean, well, you just have to make some inferences. If you go, let me pull the doc up.
Real
I think
quick,
I saw it
Jeff.
somewhere in the spin doc.
It is, but I mean, it's only given one line. What we need are some examples so that people don't have to make a bunch of inference about what we were talking about in the doc.
Jeff, your example looked pretty good. That you should.
Yeah, I think that was an example that Chip wrote.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a sidetrack, quick comment mostly for Jeff. The login, log out thing on the site seems to be fixed. I can now
Oh,
get
good.
to my account and orders and whatnot.
All right.
It all seems.
I know that we had somebody working on it, so maybe he solved it. That's
Yeah,
great.
still got the wrong shipping numbers, but and it's supposed to be free for over $200, but it's not. Like Ken said in his comment, that probably won't be in for a few days.
Okay, thanks for the
Yeah,
update.
I got my order in. Seemed to go through okay.
Hey, Chip, just to drive something home, if I understand correctly from what you were saying, you could have a little piece of inline assembly in, say, one spin routine that's orged at 0 that starts up a interrupt so that it continues running in the background like a terminate stay ready, like what you were talking about. And then other inline assembly that's all orged, say, at a higher address in other spin methods, and everything will execute just fine as long as it doesn't overlap the same location.
Right. I mean, you could even make a decision that I'm going to use this span of registers to do this thing. This span of registers is gonna do this, and then this span is going to be a buffer. And as long as that doesn't get disrupted, you could have several programs running in that thing on interrupts. Or if you have some important function that you need in assembly and you want it to execute really fast, just leave it in the register space and call it. And it'll go really quick.
Okay.
It won't even load it. It'll just jump to that register.
And one of the ways that it could be disrupted is by including some other spin object that has other inline assembly.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking through the docs. I'm trying to find where we talked about inline assembly here.
So if you don't specify on your inline assembly org and end, it'll just always go to 0?
Yeah, if you just say org, it'll start it at 0. If you say org $100, it'll start it there.
Right. So you'd probably want to put your interrupt thing at a higher address.
Right.
And then all the normal stuff will go in at the lower addresses.
Right.
Yeah, so that it plays nice with hopefully a lot of objects that may have just a little bit of spin, or excuse me, inline assembly.
Until you include an object that does the same interrupt thing and uses the higher address that stomps your higher address.
Right.
You just have to.
But that would be in the same file, right? So you'd be able to find that.
No, it could be in a different file.
Oh, no, you're
yeah,
right.
it could be another object that you include.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to use this fancy new Johnny
Chip,
Mac object.
I have a question. What if you include an array of objects that have inline assembly, the same inline assembly, because it's the same source? You're including 4 instances of them. Would they all stomp each other in this example if they had an interrupt routine loaded in at some location? Or would they all be merged into one and just have one interrupt?
You mean if they all use the same code?
Yeah, like the same source file being included as 4 instances of the same object, like you can do in Spin, right?
Oh,
you can create an array of objects instead of a single one.
Right.
Would that actually run 4 separate instances of the inline assembly interrupt code?
No, because there's no what's that called, like parent child, things get flat when you get to the register space. There's no way to like nest instances or anything. It just
right. So all 4 copies of the same object would load into the same place and stomp each other.
Last instance in wins.
Yeah, the last guy would be the newest. But if they were all the same code, I don't know. They'd be doing the same things, but maybe they'd be overriding some little variable space they had within their code area.
I guess it's really only a problem if they're using some kind of what, for lack of a better term, an exclusive resource like a specific interrupt. But if it's just a routine that you're you know, it runs through and then it's done, shuffles in and out. That's no problem.
I was speaking specifically of the terminate, stay resident, interrupt handler example, right? As inline assembly.
Yeah.
If you included that object in an array, it would fail in that case, unless that code was set up to like offset each instance to a different address in cog space. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there a way that
Well,
could
there'd
be
have to be
done?
some agreement. You could use, you know, the first, is it 16 longs are not really used for anything. So you could make some agreement that you could always reference those to know who's used what locations. You could have some kind of agreement. And that starts to get complicated though, for, you know, having lots of different people work on something that adheres to that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a special case thing that if you want to try to abuse it in advanced ways, you can, but it covers like 99.9% of the use cases with how it works now.
And
it's totally fine.
Your DAT versus your var, your DAT is class data while your vars are instance data, and so you can communicate who's using what through the DAT section as well.
It seems like certain patterns of PASM would be safe to use like in a stack local sense and others wouldn't. And if there's some kind of filter for what inline PASM is safe to use in a reentrant way, then we might want to put like a syntax helper or something like that in Proptool or Pnut to say, this is relocatable, this is layerable, and it's not going to have conflicts as long as you don't stomp on your own registers or whatever. There's certain opcodes that will definitely not be safe for that though.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a problem unless you try to do the interrupt, terminate, state resident thing, because each time you run into the inline assembly, it'll load itself up into the cog and run itself and be done. So it should all just work, no problem. It's only if it tried to do that trick to leave it in memory.
So can I get a clarifying question? Chip, when this PASM is run, does it just take an available cog to do it in?
No, it's using the same cog that is running the interpreter.
Oh, okay.
You know, I don't see any example in the docs of inline assembly, but there is one somewhere, isn't there?
I suspect there'll be one really soon.
Hey, Chip,
if you keep looking, Chip, I suspect there'll be one soon.
Chip, in the document that John Titus wrote about the smart pins, he uses a lot of assembler examples in there.
And they're in line within PASM methods?
No, they're not. John just wrote in pure assembly.
Okay, because I'm not seeing even, I thought I covered this.
Did you put it in the Silicon manual maybe?
No, you put an example in your Pnut zip file, Chip. That's probably what you're thinking of.
Remember that day I called you, Chip, and I was asking, so which orgs are allowed in inline assembly and which aren't?
Because you didn't know because it's not documented.
Yeah, it wasn't documented anywhere
Well,
that
gosh,
I could find.
That's so fundamental. I thought I had covered that. So I'll work on that very soon.
That'd probably be the quickest feature you had all week.
Yeah. Well, there's not much to say about it, but it needs to be said.
Yeah.
So Jeff, before I forget, any other cool tricks up your sleeve for Propeller tool? Because you know how much I like that tool, and I'm thinking, okay, I've run out of suggestions, but maybe, you know, you're a clever guy. What are you gonna add?
Well, you mean features that I've added recently?
Well, yeah, that we don't know about. Because,
Oh.
you know, I've been asking for the same thing since the P1 tool came out.
There is something that's coming, and that is going to help a lot with the, well, you kind of know about this. There's a feature that I added in many years ago and then never totally finished. I think it actually works completely, but there's no user interface to configure it. And it allows you you can specify multiple folders for your library objects, and it will search them in the order that you've provided. And I want to expose that and also make sure that it works properly for everything now that we have both P1 and P2 support in the Propeller tool. And to that end, John also had suggested that we make it so that the library itself, there's essentially two separate folders, one for P1 code, one for P2 code for the library that comes with the Propeller tool. Now, right now there's just one place that's considered the Propeller library. And in this tool, you'll see this version that I'm going to release today, you'll see that there's P1 and P2 code in there. And also there's a demo subfolder that is similar to what we had before, and it has P1 and P2 code. And you can filter it by just telling it to show you just P1 code or just P2 code, if that's what you want. But I think John was after making it a little cleaner for, when he's exploring it through other means also. So I've been thinking about that. The one thing I'm not sure exactly how to handle is the little favorites feature in the Propeller tool for the library. I think it'll just have to be a separate line item for each, but it'd be kind of nice. Well, I don't know, maybe I haven't had a whole lot of time to think about it, but that's the stuff that's going to be, I'm hoping to finish up before my next presentation on it, so that it'll, hopefully be a lot more natural for those of us that are dealing with code from both systems.
Jeff?
Yes.
Are you guys, Jeff or Chip, either one, are you guys gonna be working on giving the Propeller 2 a lot of support in Blockly Prop? I ask because that's what most of my students like to work in, is Blockly Prop, and it's an easy way to get people started.
That's really a question that we need to bend Ken's ear for, because he was instrumental in making sure, or bringing the P1 support into Blockly Prop, and in particular C. We did support Spin at first, and we switched to C mainly because of the education needs that they really wanted to see. C, they were teaching C code. So I would say a long time ago, we talked about this, that will we use P2 in education? I think it's a given that we will use P2 in education, because there's so much more that we can do with it, without taxing the high level resource that the coder is writing in. And it's going to take some effort to do that. I'd love to see it supported in Blockly Prop. So I'm a big proponent of that. I'm not sure if Ken's on board yet.
I am. You. Yeah, my ears perked up, but I just know we're not ready to go there, in any form at the moment.
Actually, there is some. Roy is working a lot, as I can see with GitHub, and to get that simply libraries ported over to P2, and FlexProp C is compiling a lot of it. I'm not a fan of C, but I'm watching it, and obviously, lots of Roy is doing a lot of work there to get kind of that simply prop library over to, and then basically it should run Blockly Prop on the P2.
Well, that would be neat, and we'll need a system, right, to host it. This has been
it would be basically just subbing in a different build step in Blockly Prop, where currently it calls out to create a make thing for Prop GCC and lets Prop GCC do the build. It would instead call to FlexProp to compile. But the C generation side, all the stuff that's on the Blockly Prop side, which generates the C code, would stay the same. There'd be no difference. There would just be the build step where it tries to build the file from the source code to then download. That would all be different, which is not a big part of it from what I understand.
What makes a big difference is with the students or even other people, when I show them the difference between what you can do with cogs, you know, versus just a single processor, they really all of a sudden get thrilled.
Well, Carol, I think the question I have, and I'd have to ask all of our educational customers, are you outrunning the capability of Blockly Prop for the P1?
Not yet, no.
Right, and you want to use the
Mostly with
latest
what I'm
hardware.
dealing with, I want things to move and lights to blink and noises to happen at the same time. And that's all pretty simple.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to get there. It's going to take what Roy's doing in community and hopefully not a cloud version. It would be really nice to have something that's fully standalone, I think. Although that's a problem in education. This is the challenge with this tool. Standalone tools like Blockly Prop do not work in education anymore because the installation has to be nothing or just go to a browser and log in. This is what it's come to. And teachers are, you know, don't get help, especially now, from their IT departments. Now the software has to be approved. We can't collect any login information, blah, 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 blah. So we have a system that does that, but it still requires installation of the client, which is the most we can get. But even that's a challenge for people. So inevitably, for it to be useful, we have to have something running in the cloud, viability in the product line, a lot of support to go with it, enough revenue generated to keep the funding of it. I mean, I want it too. I kind of wonder if we can get it from
disagree.
Python.
What you need is something running on a P2, and don't mess around with the cloud PCs, Windows, Linux, whatever. Shoot it. Build some P2 doing it.
I love that idea, but I think we could all use something like that. But in a classroom, I don't know if they're gonna like bring in discrete monitors and keyboards. I think today that the kids are already carrying their Chromebooks, and that's the expectation, that things work with those systems. But I would, yeah, for me, I'd be happy
Chromebooks and iPads. It's
Not
all over the
iPad
place.
though. Not iPad anymore. For a while that was a thing, but we don't get any requests for that anymore.
Oh,
But,
we still have a ton of them in the San Diego school.
I know.
That's a good example of what we've been up against, though. It's the latest thing that, oh, now we have to support this. And it's, you know, there was a time where we put out a lot of money for an outside developer to make an iPad app, and it got all the way to almost finished.
Yep.
And then Chromebooks took over, and we stopped hearing of anybody that needed it. And that's why we would love to do this sort of platform agnostic thing, so that it's more natural.
Because Chromebooks are like 1/3 the price of iPads.
Right.
Ken,
Now, we had talked
if you've got
running the editor on the our Wi-Fi device. What is that we were just talking about? Is that still the solution that we want to try? A JavaScript fully functional JavaScript based editor.
What, on the ESP32?
Yes.
Yes. Or the 8266.
Yeah, that's I think the final frontier at this point.
Well, there was a really good one.
Bullshit. We have now MicroPython running with a nice editor. We can save, okay, now just to the file system. In the flash.
It's not mutually exclusive.
So P2 doesn't have enough resources compared to an ESP for memory and running JavaScript and running a web server.
In order to do that, you'd have to build a memory manager and do hub exec and buffer to, off-chip memory to hold the Python that people want to use, and it's just not worth it.
You need to use multiple P2s to create it, whereas you could use a P2 with one ESP32 or 86.
Yeah, what the P2 is good at, I mean, it's good at a lot of things. I mean, I was talking to my uncle who's a dabbler the other day about why it's different. And I was going through one thing after another, and then I didn't even get to smart pins, and he was asking questions. And the thing is, it does a whole lot of stuff for one chip, right? And there's a lot of work that went into that, as we all know. But it doesn't work as a general purpose application like a von Neumann architecture application processor, right? There's a whole niche that it feels very well. And I think if we try to force it into being the desktop for everybody, we're going to kind of sell it short in the other ways and avoid focusing on the really cool things that are built into it.
Yes, agreed.
100%
There's no
agreed.
reason.
Isn't there
There's
a
no reason why it can't compile, self-hosted compile, and use a terminal. That terminal can be an iPad. It can be a Raspberry Pi with the new one. It can be a PC. It can be a Chromebook. It can be an LCD and a keyboard. It can be a VGA. All of those don't make any difference to the underlying feature. If you can compile on the P2, you've eliminated all the other problems that you've got.
Well, the
And it's
P2 then also
only a
has to
tiny
host.
interface issue between the P2 and whatever's the screen and keyboard.
Yeah. So it would have to host a web server to work on all those platforms without them needing to install something, which is the requirement.
Not necessarily.
They need to not install anything. That's the problem. So
Yes.
it has to be web hosted, which means the P2 has to serve the web page to allow you to compile.
Yeah, as much as I really enjoyed the initial wave of macros and learning how to do Quick Basic and Microsoft Basic, and that was all great, right? Well, a lot of us experienced that. My son's not going to go for it. Sorry. He's going to need a web browser. He's going to need to be multitasking. He's going to need to be looking at other things or his phone. And if I could get him to go down the same path I went down to learn how computers work, I mean, I would relish him having that. But that's just not reality for 20-somethings or teenagers these days who are getting into coding. They're not going to focus directly on that closed system.
So they're not going to code, full stop.
Not necessarily.
That's what we're saying here. It's whether we can code on a P2, whether you code on the P2 or you code on the PC or you code anywhere else. If the kids are not going to code, then it's a non-starter, full stop.
I wasn't saying they're not going to code. I think that we just have to be aware of what it takes to keep them interested. Right? We have to keep them connected.
What does that say for the state of software in the future?
that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
I think they're doing the
if they
same
don't learn
thing
the
that
way
my
we are.
granddaughter does, who's in college in her 20s. She'll have two screens up. One of them has Google on it, and the other has her homework on it. So she does her homework on the one and Googles the answers on the other one.
Right, so is she really learning anything?
I don't think so.
Well,
I don't really think so, because by the time she moves on to something else, you can ask her a question about something she studied last month and she doesn't really.
I was reading something the other day. Some guy was saying all this stuff about college loan forgiveness is nonsense. Just get the colleges to give the money back.
Yeah, the problem these days is, at least the last 20 years, is that schools don't teach you how to learn. They just teach you a bunch of facts.
Or how to tell.
You need to learn how to learn.
The
And
schools don't teach you how to think.
Well, maybe. So it's really like a business problem for us. I've been in 1,000 schools and things keep getting higher level and easier to use. And that's sort of the expectation because STEM has become all inclusive. It's coding, mechanical robotics, biology, all these sciences. And it's supposed to be easier. Now there's a wider variety of people using it. And you can say the skill level is lower, but the business fact of the matter is to get into a classroom, you have to play by the way they learn and by the systems they have. It doesn't matter what you think, how it should be. It's irrelevant. You know, this is why sometimes great engineering ideas don't go anywhere in business. We have to give them what they want, you know, and that's.
And sadly, the people making these decisions in the education system about what to buy for the students to learn on are people that are completely disconnected from reality. And a lot of times it's all driven by money and partnerships and not by what would actually be best.
And I should probably pause the recording button, but I mean, I've taught 500 of them since March, and a lot of times we spend lots of time downloading and unzipping zip files. Okay, they have other challenges and they have student management challenges, but the fact of the matter is this little thing, because it runs in a browser, is currently the winner. No software installation required.
Yeah.
And the word Python is big, regardless of whether you know what it means, what it is, what it's like, what it's not. You know Python is hot, and if you're a teacher in Chicago Public Schools, you have to have it.
So we need Lachlan and Brian to get their stuff more done so we can buy it all and advance it all.
And that is the ticket to enabling more successful P2 efforts from Parallax, truthfully.
There was a good browser-based editing tool that was bundled with the BeagleBone Black at one point, and it was quite capable. Unfortunately, Amazon bought that software and turned it into another cloud thing. There are other code editors out there that can be used as a building blocks, but nothing that's basically the whole kit of being able to plug in a local compiler and things like that. But there still may be something of that project still out there in their open source repo from before that is salvageable. So maybe worth looking into.
Yeah.
A turnkey
technology.
And I should point out that even the very popular Arduino, right, which is the kind of the mainstay in every class, as soon as distance learning became a standard and all these kids were sent home with Chromebooks, there was no way to run the Arduino IDE. And so Parallax offers free to teachers an edu.codebender license. And it's the only way they could program it. So even they've gone this way. No installations.
Wow.
To really succeed in education. Now, it'll return to some normalcy when they're back in class because teachers are starting to swing towards buying Windows machines instead of Chromebooks for the first time. But
yeah, I can speak a little bit to that just to underscore that however we can simplify the experience and make it hardy for teachers, that's the best, because they come from all walks of life. Some are complete beginners and some are experts, and everywhere in between. And one thing I found out during the whole distance learning thing is that many teachers had to work even harder during that time because, for one thing, they were using web-based technologies that they weren't familiar with in many cases. But also, there were a lot of teachers like the one I spoke to that said she had to spend a whole lot of time proving that her students were attending so that the school could get funded. That they were attending the distance learning class, and they had to go over and beyond what they normally have to do that, more so than just taking attendance. So there's all kinds of pressures that they're under. So anything that we can do to simplify the experience for them is a big win.
Can I ask a hardware question? On my screen, Lachlan and Ray are side by side. This kind of applies to them, I think. And I was having this conversation with Chip yesterday. I'm not one that wants to turn my P2 into a full-blown retro computer, but what I would really love is to use that upper 15 megabytes of flash as a file system. Now, aren't you guys doing, and Ray, you may have done something like that already in your CPM, or Lachlan, are you guys doing that? And it came up because I was playing with the ESP32 and I saw this online thing that say they're getting away from SPIFs and they're going to little file system or something else so that you had proper directory structure and those kind of things. It wasn't a flat structure, but I think, with the P2, by default, people are sticking a 16 meg flash on there, but we don't right now have an easy way to get to it.
Yeah, but we'll do a walkthrough of what we've already got implemented in MicroPython so you can just see what's already baked in. There are instructions on the new site which just went live today on which just touch on some of the commands which are built in for manipulating the built-in file system, which Brian Osprop here wrote, and did a really nice job on, but he's made it super easy to work with, regardless of whether you're using like a serial connection, REPL connection to MicroPython, or if you're using, like you've got a VGA monitor and keyboard plugged in, so you can use this either way. And you can do things like there's a trick with the new editor where we actually just add a single line to the top of the code, which we want to save to the file system, where you literally just put a backtick save and then the file name. And when that gets sent to the MicroPython, it will also store it in the flash on the P2. So, we've got some of these features built in already. And, the flash file system, we're not using little fs to do this. We just want something like lean and mean, runs in a single cog, and, does the job, but, has wear leveling and some of the best features of little fs built in. With MicroPython, we're also, you also do have the ability to access little fs and, bring things in from an SD card and that kind of thing. But we feel it's just a little bit probably early to release that sort of functionality and support that functionality right now. It's sort of there for experimental purposes.
But is it possible to use your PASM cog for the file system in the flash from, let's say, PASM or FlexGUI or whatever it's called?
Yeah, in MicroPython we have an editor, and so we can edit text, whether it's Python text or whether it's PASM text. Obviously we can't compile it, but you can edit, the code in inverted commas on the P2. We're trying to just make sure that things are as possible to do from, if you're on the REPL or serial connection, or if you've got a monitor hooked up, or, down the track we'll probably hook up LCD displays more directly, and drive them at a low level, so all these things should be possible to do, and you don't necessarily have to, you can just sort of switch back and forth depending on what you've got available.
No, what I mean is coexistence again, the same thing I always have to talk with Peter about. The idea is that the same driver which is used by MicroPython right now to access the file system, is it possible to get it in some sort of a spin object that you can use the same file system out of spin?
It's in PASM too, Michael, and so it's kind of portable. It's in its own cog. We haven't really documented the APIs or anything for that, and we're not going to do that in the short term. But it's sort of more important actually to use the thing and get some feedback and kind of to solve these sort of marketing or usability challenges first in a way. I don't want to sort of get into arguments over how it's callable or not callable. It's important just to use it as it is and just see how it fits into the various challenges which people are presenting, because I think that's where the sticking point is. It's not that we can generate technical solutions almost as fast as we can generate agreement on how we should do things. So I think it's probably the thing to try first, just see how useful it is, see if it meets the challenges, get some feedback. But it is nice. I mean, once you've got it in that form, we've got an editor which runs in a cog, we've got a file system which runs in a cog, and obviously we can adapt that, as we start calling in between languages and things. We should be able to, to hook all that stuff together. But it obviously requires documentation and examples, and right now that's the area we don't really have a massive bandwidth. I don't think anyone's got a massive bandwidth on that.
I mean, you're doing a great job. Question about that. And I love to see because you have already a development system running which could run kind of chips spin interpreter if chip would kind of build it.
The other approach is to outsource for compiling. Chips Chips code only runs on a 386, but we could send, the file to a 386 system across some kind of link and get the results back. That might be a way to get there fast.
Bullshit. We just have to get Tuzo to get the 9080 to do x80, 86? And chip has to kind of come down from 386. And then we run that stuff on emulators.
Oh, I'd like to do that, and maybe we'll get there soon. In fact, I started working on a file system to do what John was asking about, so that we could use that extra 15 megabytes. And then once we have that, we can, that's the springboard, that's the main thing we're missing that we need in order to be able to start doing development on the chip.
Chip, we've already got, Chip, if I can interrupt you right there, we already have, remember Kai's FAT32 driver?
Right.
And the PASM driver? I have that running under spin now, and the actual raw driver that ran in a separate cog to access the SD runs in a separate cog. That's running now. I publicised it many months ago.
Yeah, I see.
So,
but
we've got a full file system access running now on the P2,
but
and have had for.
Or the SD card, and those Australian team has the whole file system running in those leftover 15 megabyte in the flash. It's all of it is there. It needs just to get integrated somehow.
Now, if you want to substitute driving a flash chip instead of the SD card, but still run FAT32 on it, there's one program that needs to change. It's a SPI access, because the PASM program I use, all you pass to it is what sec do you want, and go and read it or write it. And there's an initialize command as well. So that's all there is. There's 4 commands to run it, and that whole thing can be substituted without the top level knowing about it, because the FAT32 runs on top of that in a spin program. So it's all there. And editing is not an issue for the moment, because you can actually drop into CPM and edit.
Yeah.
So it's not an issue for editing. What we don't have is the compiling.
Right. I mean, we can also drop into Python and use that editor.
Yeah.
Basically, the problem is that Chip has stopped to do that stupid debug stuff and start to build a compiler.
But dude, they again, there's probably lots of us that would love to do data loggers or any of those kind of things where we can use a file system or to play audio. I've got a laser tag company that I did a P1 controller for. They're now interested in the P2. And so probably for the next year, we're going to be doing, we're going to convert all that P1 code to P2. And in the P1, we had to put an SD card onto the system because the program was, the scope of the entire program was so big, I had to break it up into 3 chunks, because there's a setup portion and a referee product and then the player product. And so they were just pre-compiled, and I stuck them on the SD card, and I could load it into the EEPROM and reboot and go. And then they wanted very high quality audio, so we put WAV files onto the SD. Well, now it would be nice to stick all that stuff in a flash. I mean, the program size is no longer an issue. But now if we could have the audio files, because it turned out that their customers never changed the WAV files. We thought they would. We thought, sites would customize. They didn't. So we might as well just preload them into the flash, but it would be really nice. So Ray, if you could point me to what you were talking about, I'd love to play with that and, with a spin interface and start to do, because I have some other projects coming up where I want to do data logging and playback.
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah,
it won't happen today because I'm building P2s as soon as I get off this.
Yeah,
that's okay. I'm still trying to figure out this RS-45 problem I have.
In the next day or two, and if not, shoot me a PM.
Ray, did you get your chips from us yet?
They're in the air.
Awesome.
But I got some from Peter yesterday, so just a small number to get some over to the States. But yours will be here probably, I would think, about Monday, Tuesday. Takes about a week. So thanks, Ken.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, I'll be a pain in the ass again as usual, but I think SD card is done by I don't know who did it really, Jesus, and then Ray. But I think we really should try to get that flash file system used by Python integrated into some spin driver or whatever, because then it could coexist between Python and it would just use the flash, like Chip asked for.
The big problem we're finding is that trying to get objects that are usable by everyone, and nobody wants to talk about how to use the objects, so everyone ends up going off on their own tangent, and we've got these objects that are not interchangeable. And I've tried 2 threads in the last week to encourage a bit of discussion, and I've got absolutely nowhere, which is at least better than the P1, because when we tried it on P1, all we got was naysayers. So we stopped everyone derailing it. So now there's no one. There's no interest in trying to make a driver that can be totally substituted to a VGA, an LCD, a serial port, a Wi-Fi port, or anything else by just changing a driver in a different cog. And that's what we need to get down to, because then you can just say, I don't have a VGA monitor, but I do have a serial port. Okay, when you're loading it up, you just change the load mechanism to the one cog, and it works. The rest of your code all goes through a mailbox. And it's this mailbox interface that's specific to the whole thing coming together. You don't want one side knowing about the other side. You've got to have this hardware,
abstraction.
I forget the correct word, but you need a hardware interface that removes the specifics. And they did that back in the early 80s.
Basic input-output system.
Yeah, I've got that